In today's Game Week 8 preview video, we're going to take a look at the best cheap options in the game right now, as well as look at the latest updates we have regarding SAKA, Brennan Johnson and KONSA's injuries. And lastly, we're going to look at the best fixtures to target this week alongside their goal and clean sheet odds. So let's jump into another Fantasy Premier League video. Just before we get stuck into the cheap forwards, I want to remind you that I am on the road to 1,000 subscribers, as you can see just above my head here. So if you do enjoy FPL content, please do consider subscribing to the channel. It really supports me as a small creator. But let's have a look at the tier list I have created for the cheap forwards under 6.9 million on FPL. First up, I do have Chris Wood, probably my favourite cheap forward option at the moment. A lot of these picks are very close in terms of positioning, so take these picks and sort of rank them with a grain of salt. I do think they're all decent options, but for me, Chris Wood is top at the moment. And let's talk about that. Why do I have Chris Wood at number 1 on my list? And for me, I think the way Forest are playing and the way Chris Wood is playing for Forest at the moment, it does look really positive for him going forward, especially when you consider sort of the fixture run he's got for the next 4 game weeks. I think the good run stops just before the swing in 12, so I think it could be a decent time to actually jump on to Chris Wood, and especially with having such a low ownership of 11.6% ownership. You've got Palace at home, Leicester away, West Ham at home, Newcastle at home. 3 out of the next 4 fixtures are home games, and of course around game week 12 and 13, in fact, you have Ipswich at home, which is a good fixture, but it is sandwiched in between Arsenal away in 12 and Man City away in 14. So still though, for the next 4 weeks, for me, Chris Wood at 6.2 million is actually a decent option. Sort of right next to him, at 6 million, a cheaper price, is Dominic Calvert-Lewin. Of course, isn't really one of the more high-scoring point totals. Well, it doesn't have one of the more high-scoring point totals this season. In fact, has only scored 2 goals and got 1 assist so far. But for me, the reason he's so high on my list, actually, is just the longevity of the good fixtures that he's got coming up. I think if he's to hit the ground running and sort of start scoring and getting assists again, I think these are the fixtures that he could do it in. You know, you've got Ipswich, Fulham, Southampton, West Ham, Brentford, United and Wolves. I think all of those sort of fixtures are decent. Maybe Brentford and United are slightly difficult fixtures for Everton at the moment, just by the way they're playing. But for me, Dominic Calvert-Lewin in second place feels correct, especially at 6 million. Next up, Wolves' fixtures have come to a bit of a stop in terms of difficulty now. We're kind of looking onwards and upwards for Matheus Cunha in third place here, with his sort of differential standpoint of 2.5%. You're sort of dealing with game week 8 and game week 9 before you kind of expect him to, get onto these really nice fixtures that he's got coming up. And sort of when you look again at the longevity of these good fixtures, it's hard to not put them high up on this tier list. And I think if you are bringing in Cunha, I think this week, next week, maybe isn't the time to necessarily bring him in now. But I wouldn't necessarily say it's a bad time to bring him in. He's probably going to go up in price around game week 10, game week 9 anyway. Maybe even this week it goes up in price. But for that longevity of good fixtures, Wolves have actually got some decent sort of goal tallies against decent sides. 2 against Chelsea, scoring against Liverpool, really nice. And of course, the game against Brentford, which was with an absolute goal fest as well, which is something to look out for. Wolves can score goals, but they are conceding quite heavily at the moment. So that is sort of Cunha at third place, but it is 6.5 million you're paying for Cunha there, so a little bit more pricey than Calvert-Lewin, of course, with the fixtures considered for the next 2. For that reason, that's why I've got Cunha third. Next up at fourth place, you've got Raul Jimenez, which I didn't think I would necessarily be saying about Jimenez. I didn't expect him to be, playing so much, but from game week 4, he's been reintroduced to the Fulham side, and as you can see, 3 goals scored, 1 assist, which isn't too bad, especially within the last 4 games where he's been playing over 70 minutes. Sort of, you can see in the first 3 there, sort of 10-minute cameos. You can't really judge from that. But yeah, not the easiest fixtures, sort of the last 4. And he has scored in 3 of those and assisted 1 as well, which is really, really great things. Which is really, really great to see from Raul Jimenez producing those great things for Fulham going forward. Fixtures are decent. Sort of, you've got Villa to deal with this game week, and then after that you've got a nice block of fixtures again before sort of this up and coming fixture swing in game week 12. It's just sort of the minutes are good, but you know, when you've got 90-minute men like Dominic Calvert-Lewin, Cunha and Wood, I suppose I'd rather go with those than sort of a lesser minute Raul Jimenez, even though the fixtures are really nice. So that's why he kind of drops to 4th for me. Next up, though, you've got Welbeck, who's someone that is owned by 20% of managers, and of course at a slightly higher price of 5.8 million. He is a 90-minute man. I will say that, especially with the injuries, you know, in the squad at the moment. João Pedro being one that comes to mind straight away. 4 goals, 1 assist so far this Premier League season. It's sort of the fixtures that really let Brighton down for me, and it's why I kind of wouldn't advise maybe Danny Welbeck. But you know, after sort of game week 12 or game week 11 even, you come into some good fixtures. So perhaps it's someone you look at. You know, Newcastle away from home isn't an awful fixture, but it's not entirely great, if we're being honest. Wolves at home, I think, could be a great fixture, especially just looking at how Wolves are kind of setting up defensively at the moment. You know, they're letting goals in left, right and centre, and Danny Welbeck could capitalise in that fixture. But when you play Liverpool and City in 10 and 11, it kind of, you know, really drops them down for me, and especially at 20% ownership, I feel as though you're going to get slightly more out of some other players on this list who have slightly less ownerships. But Danny Welbeck's still a decent option in my opinion, especially when you look slightly longer term with that fixture run coming up for him. And actually in 6th place now, one of the more cheaper options in the list, you've got Liam Delap. And we'll just pull up how he's been doing so far this Premier League season. 4 goals. Really nice for Liam Delap, of course, only a young lad and new to the Premier League. But sort of when you look at the minutes totals, they're kind of everywhere. But I would say that he is sort of a key part of this Ipswich team. So I do expect him to get decent minutes. The fixtures, they're decent. They really are decent. It's sort of just, it is Ipswich you're talking about here. Are they going to have sort of better quality than some of the other people, you know, other teams on this list, the likes of Fulham, Forest, you know, Wolves and Brighton? Are they going to be matching those in terms of output numbers for attack? Possibly they could, especially when you look at some of the slightly easier fixtures amongst this list. But for me, the fixtures are kind of iffy. They are okay, but, you know, Everton, decent fixture. Brentford away from home, I think that's a difficult fixture. Then you've got Leicester, who will put up a fight away from home. Then you've got Spurs, United and Forest. I think Spurs, out of those, the last 3 I've just read out, is actually probably the best one, especially with how well Forest are defending and how sort of boring United are in the way they play. They're not necessarily you know, nice to play against. We've seen that with Villa just recently playing them. But yeah, this is sort of the cheap forwards list. I don't want to make it too long of a section. Hopefully, the people who need this information have watched all the way to this point now. But let's move on to the next section of the video. Right, in this section of the video, we're going to take a look at the latest injury news regarding these 3 players on screen here. Some of the more popular players that we need injury news on. We'll start with Bukayo Saka, which I think is very obvious that a lot of people own Saka at the moment and are, you know, a little bit worried, but I feel as though this quote kind of settles me down as a Bukayo Saka owner. So Lee Carsley has said that Bukayo would have been close, but it would have been unfair to put him at risk. You know, he's a positive person. I expect him to be fine. That was after the small knock he received on international duty. So I take that quote from Carsley, and I think, yeah, it's probably quite positive. I do, in my opinion, expect Saka to be okay and to be available for Arsenal. If he can play, will definitely play for Arsenal. It's not very likely that Saka takes a seat on the bench with something like this. It's just sort of not what's happened historically. But you just never know. I suppose maybe a press conference quote, a training picture or something like that could come out slightly later in the week for Arsenal. So something just to keep an eye out on at the moment. But for me, I do expect him to be fine, as well as Lee Carsley expects him to be fine. Brennan Johnson next, sort of a popular player in terms of transfers in lately. I brought him in last week, which I thought was the best time to bring him in, and he did in fact score in that fixture, which was really great to have. Again, a small knock on international duty. He actually missed the second game of international duty against Montenegro because he had too many yellow cards rather than the injury keeping him away from the squad. So that's positive in itself, and everything to me points that Brennan Johnson is okay. There's sort of no flag on FPL at the moment, which is another great sign. But we'll move on to KONSA though. 75% chance of playing, says FPL with their yellow flag, and I've sort of stumbled across this account a few times on my X feed, Twitter feed, whatever the hell you want to call it. The FPL physio, he kind of breaks down the injuries in the Premier League and kind of puts a time frame on them and sort of his opinion in terms of FPL. And he came off in the 11th minute in the game against United. The FPL physio suggests to FPL that this playing chance should probably be 50-50 at this point, especially when you take into consideration the sort of time frame you're looking at for these type of injuries, sort of the minor hamstring injury. It's sort of 2 to 4 weeks. So using that logic, yes, he could play this week, but I guess I would say sort of reintroduced to the squad next week. But we just never know. Again, we don't have too much information other than this at the moment for these three players. So again, it's sort of a wait and see moment for the more information. Like I say, training pictures, quotes may come out, so keep your eyes peeled for those sort of things. And of course, I should be able to get this sort of information out to you guys quite quickly this week with later videos down the line and sort of my social media pages. And if you aren't following, do click these links in the description and use the links above my head when they pop up, and go follow my short form content pages, where I will reintroduce this information to you guys later down the week. But let's move on now to the fixtures to target. In this section, I'm just going to take a look at the fixtures we're dealing with for Game Week 8, point out a few fixtures that I do quite like the look of in terms of goals in those fixtures and sort of players that could do really well this game week. Sort of what stands out straight away for me is Ipswich versus Everton. I think this could be a basketball-style game, very backwards and forwards. Both teams can go fast on the attack, and I think that'll be shown quite a lot in this fixture. A lot of change in possession, very quick, and whoever jumps on that ball and counters correctly will come out on top on that fixture. So players like Dwight McNeil, Calvert-Lewin, Delap, all up there in my opinion as decent picks for that fixture. As well, Southampton and Leicester, a game which both teams probably need to go ahead and win. A slightly easier possession for both of them, especially with the teams they've faced so far in the Premier League. So perhaps another one to be targeting. Arsenal versus Bournemouth, of course, I could say every single week that Arsenal have a decent fixture, but it is away to Bournemouth, and Bournemouth are playing decent at the moment. I think just with the way the results and goals against them lately that Arsenal have received, perhaps it's a point to prove this week against a Bournemouth side that are good at attacking, that our defence is actually really solid. So for myself, I've got a double Arsenal defence. I'm not expecting a massive chance of a clean sheet this week because Bournemouth do attack greatly, but going forward potentially the likes of Saka, Havertz and possibly Trossard or Martinelli, depends who is playing, but I do think it should be Trossard. Could be someone to be looking at this game week. Wolves and Man City, I mean, it goes without saying that Erling Haaland for this fixture is fantastic. Obviously, he's going to be my captain this game week in particular. Wolves are leaking goals, and I did mention that in the previous section of the video. Wolves did, I think, beat Manchester City last season, so perhaps that happens again. Who knows? But yeah, I do think this is a good fixture for Man City assets. Of course, a lot of people kind of moving to Foden last week, so perhaps Foden is a good choice as well as Haaland and, you know, Bernardo Silva, someone maybe who's going a little bit under the radar for City at the moment. I just hope as a Rico Lewis owner that they don't let in a silly goal, but you know, Wolves do attack decent at times, especially with like Mateus Cunha and players like that. The little bit of quality they've got in the squad. Liverpool and Chelsea, I'm not necessarily expecting a lot of goals in this fixture. Maybe a nice chilled game, trying to keep a hold of the ball, a lot of possession-based stuff. Palmer and Salah, kind of key assets and premiums that, you know, are expected to come out with something even in these matches. And lastly, you've got Forest versus Palace, a game which I definitely think is one to target. A weak Palace side, an informed Forest team, in my opinion. Chris Wood, Hudson-Odoi, maybe players to look at from Forest, in my opinion. But yeah, those are the sort of fixtures that we're dealing with for Game Week 8. I'm just going to move on now to the goal scored and clean sheet odds for these fixtures. Here is the clean sheet and goal odds for the game week. In the first column, you can see 3 green boxes for the goals here, and City comes out on top with 2.21 goals. In a very close second and third, actually, of Spurs and Liverpool. Spurs coming slightly on top by 0.1 with 1.88 goals. Liverpool very close behind them, 1.87 goals. And of course, we spoke about the players to target from these fixtures, and of course the Spurs fixture there, Brennan Johnson, James Maddison, Solanke, players in that attacking line to look out for. Clean sheet on the other hand, sort of City again in first place. This is a really, really great City fixture this week. 46%, 46% chance of a clean sheet. I'm getting my numbers mixed up. And then second and third place, again, very, very close. Forest in second there with 38% chance. Arsenal in third with a 37% chance. So those are the goal and clean sheet odds for Game Week 8. In this section, I just wanted to share a little bit about captaincy and who's predicted to get the most points this game week. Who does Fantasy Football Hub think is going to come out on top? You can see straight away I've put it down to Game Week 8 on the sort of filters at the top. Maximum price, so anyone sort of from premium to cheap will come up in this list, and we'll sort of look at sort of maybe the first 6 to 5 or 4 players here really quickly. Salah actually coming out on top, which I didn't expect with his home fixture. Chelsea he is facing this week, and he's expected to score 8.3 points this game week. Haaland closely behind him at second with 8.1 predicted points. I do think Haaland will score quite a few points this game week against Wolves, and I'm hoping so, especially after 2 blanks in a row. Palmer a little bit behind Haaland, but 6.6 predicted points against a tough Liverpool side at Anfield. So again, that added away fixture probably puts his predicted points total a little bit down. Not too far away from him actually is Chris Wood, someone we spoke about in the cheap forward section of the video, someone who I think for the next 4 fixtures is a pretty good option. It's sort of 6 predicted points for him. And then we'll speak just about Foden here. Don't want to make this section too long. Of course, that City fixture, as we've seen with the clean sheet odds, and of course the goals odds, that this is a great fixture for City, and Foden as well as Chris Wood is expected to score 6 points. So those are sort of the predicted points from Fantasy Football Hub in terms of captaincy options this game week. To outro every video, I like to give you guys at home a big thank you for supporting the FPL Mugs YouTube channel. Of course, I'm on the road to 1,000 subscribers, so if you have enjoyed today's video and you aren't yet subscribed, please do consider it to get weekly FPL content as well as deadline streams every FPL deadline for the whole entire season. But that is everything for today's video. Thank you again so much for watching, and I will catch you in the next one. Bye for now.